Chupa.
Shoopa doopa.
Choop, choope doop, choope doop, choope doope, doope doop. That one?
Yeah, that one.
I love Katie Hooper. She's the best.
Her child is such a little muppet.
What would you expect?
From those two? No, nothing.
Hello, and welcome to Expected Own Goals. I am your host, Eric Morgan, who is not listing publications he's written for as well this week.
Yeah, it's because he's in solidarity with me, Evan Davis. Welcome to the show, everybody. Doc's not here.
Yeah, the doc decided to go see some broso with some bro friends.
I'm just gonna say, I had a really good time in San Jose going to the Bay FC home opener. I still made it back in time to record this episode. Just putting that out there. Kidding. Love you, Doc. Miss you. Hope you get back soon.
So we're doing something a little different this week. We're going to talk about 3 different versions of how games are won in the final minutes, because we had 3 versions of that, of the 7 games that were played this weekend. 3 of them decided in injury time. Each of them has a really different sort of tactical rub going both directions from both teams. How does one win in the final moments of a game is sort of what we're going to be looking at this week. Let's start with I think you described it as, what was it, suffer ball versus...
So that's not me. All credit to our friend Andre Carlisle, who described the San Diego Wave against the Seattle Reign in San Diego as suffer ball 1, struggle ball 0.
That's exactly right, because that was such a succinct and perfect way of looking at this. I started looking at the individual chances. Seattle, who lose this game, created 0.5 XG all game. Of that 0.5 XG that they created more than half of it from the 88th minute on. But that shouldn't confuse you into believing that they had these good chances. They had a shot that I think is debatably even countable as a shot from G that bounces, that she slips and falls. It's blocked right into the path of Bethany Balser, who scuffs the shot from like 12, 13 yards out. And then you had Ziara King essentially get stifled trying to create an individual chance in the 95th. Those 3 chances, none of which looked threatening, were more than half of the XG created in this game.
Yeah.
But the key thing that was happening in all of this was that Seattle was not committing numbers forward, even on the counter, to try to get a winner. They felt like individual brilliance might just be enough, and that was the plan. Kind of the plan the whole game.
I mean, I'm looking at their passing network right now. Jordan Huitema, Ji So-yun, Livia Athens, and Bethany Balser are just on the other side of the halfway line. If you look at StatsBomb passing network, they color code by quality of passing. Blue is basically negative passing. Either you're playing really, really safe passes or you are missing a lot of passes. And then red is you're playing really high percentage and making those passes. Anyway, nobody is even close to yellow if we're going to go from blue to red among those attacking players.
By StatsBomb's metric, Ankara James was the only person who had what one might approach and say was a solid enough game.
Yeah, incredibly conservative. It's to the point where it didn't even look like, because they like to play with a diamond, it was structured more like a defensive box midfield, which is a really weird thing to do with a box midfield. Huitema and G were right on top of each other for a lot of the game and not creating any kind of space. There was no width here except for the times that Sofia Huerta got forward, which was not often. Lily Woodham was playing very, very conservatively. Huerta was playing pretty conservatively for her. I have to wonder if you were like a new fan to the NWSL and you tuned into Amazon Prime on Friday night, just what the fuck you thought you were in for, because it started with the most inside of inside jokes in this league, which is that Laura Harvey and Casey Stoney both sit on coolers on the touchline. And Mike Watts and Lori Lindsay, the broadcast team, did this whole video sketch about being like, I think they called themselves the Cooler Kids. And if you didn't know this like weird like Twitter thing, you would have been like, what the hell are they doing? But there's history. Stoney's never beaten Laura Harvey. And these are also the 2 most defensively minded teams that also can win games. So there was never going to be anything particularly exciting here. Looking at the passing network for San Diego, Alex Morgan just lived in the box and didn't really receive any passes.
Though she was, to return to the end, quite decisive, ultimately. She has what I think is a good goal chalked off. I didn't see a replay that was convincing that that cross had been out of bounds before it had been scored. I actually thought Alex Morgan, even on Van Egmon's goal, which is a fortuitous goal if there ever was one, Alex Morgan is right there to block Savannah McCaskill's shot and to redirect it right into Van Egmon's path.
Yeah, because again, she had 10 touches in the box, which is ridiculous. That is a ridiculous number of touches for any player to have in the box in a single game. And if you look at her heat map, like there is just a big bright red spot of her standing in the penalty area. What I'm trying to get at is that these are teams that were both living down to their reputations of being very, very conservative. And one had an objective to try and grab a goal through either a cross or long service from Abby Dahlkemper up to Savannah McCaskill to try and release Morgan in the box. And they both kind of just did that for 90 minutes. So in our first example of how you get a late winner, San Diego's plan was more or less stuck to. There really weren't that many adjustments to it as the game went on. It just was very, very stodgy because they were going up against a very, very defensively stodgy team too.
But what you saw as the game sort of advanced, and San Diego generate 8 shots from the 67th minute on. Not all of them are particularly good shots, but they started funneling numbers forward. So when Seattle was attacking with 4 on the counter, they were immediately coming back to absorb the pressure of 8 the other direction, which I was impressed with from a Casey Stoney team. Sort of once you get to the 75th minute on, San Diego is just ratcheting up the intensity and really going for it.
And what we see here, too, is 2 different responses to game state, right?
Exactly.
One team deciding that they would prefer preserving a draw, which you sort of understand given their tactical identity and also the fact that they're playing on the road. And that is often how coaches think about road games when they don't have a lead deep in. They just think, okay, a draw will be fine here. It's a respectable result. This is one of the better teams in the league. If we can grab a point on the road, that sets us up pretty well for next week. Whereas San Diego is playing at home in front of almost 17,000 fans. They had broken the home opener attendance record the week before. I think Stoney does have a little bit of a chip on her shoulder that she's never beaten the Reign. So there is just more motivation and incentive for her to add more numbers into attack when they do have possession.
I suppose I would like to see this version of Casey Stoney going for games more. You have to wonder if there isn't a personal element in it. That said, Van Egmond, essentially from the minute she came on, really was announcing herself in a way that Jaden Shaw wasn't, which I thought was sort of concerning.
Do you think that's just it wasn't Shaw's night, or do you think Stoney was asking her to step out a little deeper because she's playing on Huerta's side? And so they know just what a big attacking outlet Huerta is for the Reign. I wonder if they're thinking, well, if we add Doniak and Shaw to make Nab's workload, we can neutralize Huerta's crosses.
I think that's absolutely what was going on.
And then the switch can flip later in the game when you bring Van Egmond on. You can say, okay, now this is the phase of play where we can open up and go for it. Or not open up, but add more numbers and to try and get Van Egmond on the end of things, allow McCaskill to try and feed balls either to Jakobsen or to Morgan. I felt to me like Shaw was doing her job. It just wasn't a very fun job.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I think Shaw dutifully fulfilled the duties of her office and then was replaced by someone who got to do more fun things, like attack. That said, when finally the fortuitous chance falls in the 90 plus 8th minute, and we could talk about all of the extra time that we are seeing. Some of that is just a byproduct of actual proper counting. But we've also seen some like pretty significant delays going on in games, whether they be with VAR checks or like extended injury time. The game is really different when you have to play an extra 10 minutes. Your legs really do pay for it. And I think that that is a contributing factor, maybe not to results turning this late, but to the sort of sloppiness that we are seeing potentially from teams later, just out of fatigue.
All of the goals that determined the results of these 3 games came in the final 2, 3, 4 minutes of very extended stoppage time, for whatever it's worth.
Yeah, Van Egmond's goal is 90 plus 8. Again, it's a McCaskill slip and fall.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot of that going on. Off of Alex Morgan's off her shin. Either she's so brilliant that she perfectly weighted that pass, or it just sort of happened.
Yeah.
But it's right into Van Egmon's path. And to Van Egmon's credit, that finish, it's both the best chance of the game in terms of just XG, and then the push shot XG is quite good. She takes her time, she picks her spot in the corner, and fires it home assuredly, making San Diego worth the victory, and I think delivering a really great result for a team that we thought would be quite good this year.
It reminds you that Van Egmond is a forward for Australia. And Casey Stoney, in all of her brilliance, decided to say, no, you're a number 6 for me, buddy.
Today, Van Egmond was like, I'm just going to hang out at the penalty spot and maybe something will fall to me. And lo and behold, it did. That said, I think philosophically, the way this game ends is it's the two sides of the coin where Seattle is relying on individual brilliance. And I'm not necessarily sure has the personnel to do that while playing quite conservatively and playing for the 0-0. And San Diego forces the issue and just bombards with numbers.
Yeah.
That was a very different approach, and one that you could feel turn up as we got toward the end of the game.
For all of the game state-based reasons or off-the-field reasons that San Diego decided to flip the switch later in the game, it still wasn't super successful.
Nope.
Besides the Van Egmond chance and the chaos at the end of the game, there weren't a lot of other really high-quality chances that they were able to make.
Not ones that were not called back by VAR. Yes, that's right.
But for the weirdness that allows Van Egmond to score, Harvey's plan also kind of worked because she just packed numbers in behind, played a very compressed shape to make sure that balls couldn't really move between the lines very much. Almost by the skin of her teeth was able to get a result.
Yeah, I continue to worry where Seattle's going to find goals. We've had a G worldie and an early penalty. These are the goals.
Why are you not allowing Bethany Balcer to play the way that Bethany Balcer should be playing?
Is Jordan Huitema even a striker? Strikers theoretically score goals. Jordan Huitema is testing the limits of that definition. Let's move on to what I felt was both the most Portland and the most Louisville game of the season.
Sure.
Louisville, you know the terrible cliche, a 2-0 lead is the most dangerous lead in soccer? Obviously incorrect, unless you are small sample size racing Louisville this season. Oh boy.
It's pretty clear what Bev Yanez's tactical plan was too. Again, playing on the road to a technically superior side in front of almost 17,000 people again. She exploded her squad out of the traps and just tried to swallow Portland up with incredible amounts of pressing that yielded a couple of mistakes and a couple of goals. And then once you have that lead, you retreat into your shell and just start packing numbers behind the ball, and you allow for the onslaught to wash over you.
Another bad sports cliche comes to mind in this instance. They scored too early. Uchenna scores 2 excellent goals right from... I have no idea what Kelly Hubley's doing on that second header. Kanu just rises up and wins that cold.
And it's a massive Janine Becky mistake that allows the first goal to happen.
Correct. Louisville pounce, but instead of preserving that level of energy, almost immediately they drop off.
It's about minute 15 that they really start pulling players back. And you can think to yourself, okay, well, we're entering a new play phase. These are not necessarily players who will have the endurance to keep up that extended amount of pressure for an entire game. Hardly any team can do that for an entire game. But the issue becomes you're playing Portland, which has attacking weapons falling out of its pockets. If you do not stay really compact and really organized once you decide to take your foot off the gas from that level of attacking half pressure, they're going to find openings at some point. I mean, my God, they outshot Louisville 27-9.
Yeah, this is what I would describe as the siege. Once Louisville capitalized on their first 2 big chances, Portland turns it into overdrive. And the game, again, this week changes with the addition of Hina Sugita. Sugita is just a massive addition to the game coming on. I do not know why she is not starting.
I don't think Norris knows who he'd have to take off. I mean, you got to take off Moultrie or Fleming or Becky. That's a big decision to make. I mean, he should make it, potentially.
Moultrie is still struggling to find her place in the passing network of this new midfield. And to a lesser extent, Jessie Fleming is as well. But once Louisville really dropped off, there was space for them to operate and create in. Moultrie comes off, and Portland only ratchets it up more.
Despite 27 shots, most of them were not great chances.
No, Louisville bunkers. again, classic Siege. They raise the drawbridge and try to hold down the fort. And frankly, it doesn't work. And it doesn't work even with 9 behind the ball because Portland's superior talent just kept pushing and pushing. The Morgan Weaver goal is pretty classic, just cleaning up in the box. Great, well-placed far post finish. She has another great chance in the 66th minute that it just kind of doesn't come to be. I actually thought Louisville was playing like a really solid counter game, even if they'd overcommitted to going back, because Pickett and Uchenekanu both have like high XG chances that are generated on the counter in the 77th and 80th minute. If they were going to attempt to put a second goal in, their approach of just battening down the hatches and then playing long nearly came off, and Portland was nearly overcommitted.
Yeah, and that's what you have to do when you're faced with this. I mean, everybody in the 11 were averaging their positions in the attacking half with Portland, whereas it was the opposite for Louisville, except for Ryland Turner. That's the way you have to win. And Pickett and Kanu, you could do worse for players to lob balls over the top to. But also, I thought Pickett was like fairly muted, and maybe more so bringing Klingenberg on and moving Marie Mueller over to the right. Mueller, I thought, actually turned in a pretty solid defensive performance and did not allow for Pickett to make a lot of passes. I mean, think about this. In the aggregate, Louisville made 40 progressive passes and carries throughout the game. Portland made 123.
Jesus. Did Louisville commit to just trying to preserve a lead when that isn't what their personnel is best at?
And also what Bev Yanez ultimately doesn't want from them. I mean, the disconnect between coach's intention and the production on the field, I think, is really no more stark than what's going on at Louisville these first 3 games. We'll get to Albertin Montoya in a second, as well as Fran Alonso in a second, but she wants Louisville to keep the ball. The reason that Weaver's goal happens is because Lund tries to play out of the back in pressure. And Lund usually doesn't do that. Lund is usually kicking it long and trying to get the ball up to Savannah DeMello or to one of the forwards. But now they want to try and hold on to the ball and move through the thirds, which has to start with the goalkeeper. Lund's not necessarily used to that. She makes a mistake. Portland are able to pounce on it because they are just swarming the opposition box constantly in the second half. They had 39% possession. And again, teams can win with that low a level of possession, and they can do it while playing well. But if your objective is to keep the ball and then you're putting up that level of possession, that's a worry. That's a real worry.
I think it is these dueling philosophies that screw Katie Lund right there, because I think game state suggests hoof it long and just like where you are and like how you are tactically approaching this. If you choose to shut up shop, you probably shouldn't be playing tight passes between your already bunched back line, right? Because you have no width in the field. You have no, there's nothing stretching the opposition, and it costs them a goal. And then we get into injury time, and Portland are just so overwhelming. You felt that the crowd was almost like going to suck a goal in at that point.
They make 7 shots in the final 7 minutes of injury time.
It's staggering. And frankly, and we're just like living around the box. Louisville probably survives this kind of barrage if we are just going by XG. But because they have essentially ceded all hope of possession in these final minutes, Portland properly get off a lot of shots. And finally, though she's a former striker, one of the unlikeliest of sources, Sam Coffey receives a ball from, I believe it's from Kelly Hubley. Nicole Payne, God bless her for getting back on the field, for getting a Nigeria call-up, and for surviving week 1, gets a hockey assist to Kelly Hubley, who then feeds the ball to Sam Coffey, who calls for it like a striker calls for the ball played in... played defeat, promptly bursts past a defender and then lofts a shot over Katie Lund, who I believe last year was statistically the best keeper in the league.
That's correct.
And just picks her spot and just loops it over her into the far side netting. A true striker's finish.
It's great finishing. And it didn't necessarily have to go that way, especially when your number 6 is the one with the ball at her feet. Also, you've invited shot after shot after shot at that point. Something was going to go in. It sort of feels like that. You play a very risky game when game state for you dictates that you just need to absorb, park the bus. you have to be incredibly well organized in order to make that work for what is essentially 75 minutes plus stoppage time. That takes a lot out of you. And, also credit to Coffee. She had 93 touches on the day, which is massive for a number 6, more than anybody else in the Thorns. She really was running the entire show whenever they had the ball. And then she was able to get the game-tying goal with a really cool finish.
We joke, we don't joke that she's the reason we have this podcast. And it was really nice to see Sam Coffey put in another really complete performance. The thing that was crazy is Louisville could have lost that game as well.
Sure.
Christine Sinclair gets 2 chances right at the death. Had Portland scored 10 minutes earlier, I think Louisville does lose that game. They'd hamstrung themselves so seriously.
Yeah, and to go back to early season issues, there are just some players who might not be 100 minutes fit yet. Louisville is just a slight cut below, technically, than Portland is. And so I think they ran out of gas and couldn't hang on. But this is, again, a different type of way that game state dictates team behavior.
Let's go to the grand finale, because it was the grandest of the finales, to be sure. Bay's inaugural home game in their inaugural season, which you were at. Mm-hmm. How was it?
18,000 people packed the stadium. It was a sellout. And my girlfriend joked, wow, people in the Bay Area must really want to root for a team not owned by John Fisher. And the San Jose Earthquakes are owned by John Fisher. So the energy was electric. I mean, Albertin Montoya, Rachel Kundanji, and Dana Castellanos all spoke to the press after the game. None of them really seemed to care about the loss. They cared about what the vibe was inside the stadium. I hope that they do care about the loss when they get into training this week, because Bay FC was more or less what we kind of have been seeing from them. Montoya thought they played excellently in the first half. I thought they played fine. Castellanos' chance comes from a lucky rebound off of Oshuala's blocked shot. That was the best chance they had of the entire night. As incredible as Kundananji's goal was, that is elite striker finishing, and maybe you say that she's one of those outlier forwards where that level of finishing is a consistent and sticky skill. I will not argue one way or the other about that, but it was a goal that came entirely from finishing. And then they just let Houston back into the game. The version of late results that this game proposes is of a team that has a very rigid, I think it might be fair to say, stylistic philosophy that does not waver regardless of the game state, regardless of the scoreline, regardless of the opponent, and works until their opponent makes adjustments. And then things can really take a turn. Like from the 60th minute onward, it's Houston's game. Aside from the Kundananji goal, Houston is running the show for those final, what ultimately becomes 40 minutes thanks to stoppage time. And they didn't necessarily play better than Bay. A draw was probably the fair result here, because Houston is also pretty pig-headed in the way that they want to play, and it costs them in big moments. We'll throw to a piece of audio from Albertin Montoya. He had a very specific vision that didn't necessarily mean winning the game, so let's listen to that.
We're going to continue just getting better and playing the brand of football that you saw in that first half, and at times in the second half, because it was exciting, right? And some might argue, it's like, well, okay, let's just go and defend and tighten up a little bit. But I'm like, let's entertain the fans. And hopefully more often than not, we'll come out on top, or I might not be around for long.
So yeah, when you prioritize entertaining the fans over managing the game state, this is what can happen.
A couple things were happening here, and I want to talk about, we've talked a lot about Bay so far, and I think that all the things that we said about sort of Bay's frailties, even down to conceding a massive first-minute chance, we saw again yesterday, I think have raised very serious concerns for me about their ability to play solid possession football. That said, for the first time, it sort of looked like, and I can't decide whether it is that Bay is actually just not very good, which is what the expected goal differential suggests. They are last in the league in expected goal differential. Again, very early season, we're not drawing huge things from this, but it is an interesting note. And Houston, who have kind of looked terrible through the first 2 games, I felt like finally their chaotic 3 at the back and then jammed forward. Football Reference is calling it a 3-1-4-2. I don't know if I want to go with that per se. The passing map suggests something a little bit different, but I think we could say that Houston is playing 3 at the back, sort of, and played
Maria Sanchez was playing left wing back.
Maria Sanchez sort of living in attack way far up the field. It's a very asymmetrical passing network if you look at it.
I don't know if I completely agree.
Yeah, what did it look like to you? I have TV TAC cam. What did it look like to you? How did it flesh out in your mind?
Sarah Puntigam was pulling out pretty far wide to try and fill space where Sanchez would normally be, and that would push Calissa Van Santen a little bit deeper, and occasionally it would look like a back four, but that never lasted long, and it only happened when they were out of possession. Going forward, I think it was mostly a 3-5-2 until those last 30-35 minutes, and all of a sudden it started looking almost like a 3-3-3-1. It got fairly narrow, and it got very, very close. Again, Fran Alonso keeps saying that he wants the team to chase goals, to attack. That's the point of soccer, is to try and score. And they're a hot mess express when they attempt to do that. I think Avery Patterson did not exactly have like a great game, but gave them width on the right that Bay finally had to think about, which they didn't have to think about all game. Caprice Didasco and Savannah King were parked in the attacking half. And King has shown a lot of defensive frailties these first three games. There was space for Houston to play with later on once Patterson came on, because King and Kayla Sharples had to account for her whereabouts in a way that they didn't really have to do earlier in the match. That was a wise thing for Alonso to do. Even so, outside of Ordóñez's header in the 66th minute, they did not seem very, very sparky. They did not create a lot of great chances. They are still very, very unbalanced, which is the negative way of saying that they are very asymmetrical. For everything good that Maria Sanchez is doing, Amanda West wasn't able to finish it. And Ordóñez, playing as deep as she was, I'm not sure activates the best of Ordóñez. I think Ordóñez needs to be a little bit higher up, but there just was no sense of balance anywhere on the field, and they grew into the game and they had a little bit more possession after that 60th minute, but that was not a result of any greater sense of control over the match. They only had 36 progressive passes and carries, so they weren't really moving the ball forward in any efficient way. Only 2 quality chances once you take away the rebound that Ordóñez scores after the penalty, which you really shouldn't count because that shot doesn't exist unless the penalty gets stopped.
And it was a terrible penalty.
If you strip the XG out of that rebound, all of a sudden the teams are totally even on XG. I think there are plenty of questions still to be asked of Houston. I don't think this is the game that necessarily proves anything, because for whatever Montoya wants to say, and we'll throw to another clip on how he thinks game state changed their performance, they leave themselves so exposed at the back, whether it's moving Didasco inside and pulling Bodie out wide, using King as a progressive option to connect with Camberos. They don't have any solidity or strength to them if they're not trying to win the ball in the attacking half. The positive spin that Montoya and Kundananji and Castellanos have given is what every Bay player and Montoya has said for 3 weeks, which is, we're still learning to play with each other. We're still working out the kinks. And you could see that players would make a run and then the pass wouldn't arrive, or the pass would go where somebody thought a player was going to be there to receive and it didn't happen. And maybe King and Didasco's work is that like maybe they should have been playing deeper at strategic moments in order to take on Houston pressure when it did come, and they need to get coordinated on which one goes and which one stays out on the wide channel. Alexis Loera is kind of emerging as a defensive liability that you can't play her as a single pivot. The Pass Network says that she and Joelle Anderson were operating as a 2, but there were plenty of times, especially going forward, and even not going forward, where Loera was left as a 1. I don't think you can play her as a single pivot at this point. Regarding how Montoya viewed that second half, I'm going to give it over to him once more.
We had some fresh legs when that third goal came in, so it's more of a mentality more so than legs, and an awareness of where we need to be and what we need to do at that point in time. But that's something that we'll continue working, and they'll push through it, and we'll get it right when it matters.
So yeah, do you think it was just mentality? Do you think it was just a loss of mental focus? I don't think so.
I mean, I actually do understand the thought. I loved Kundananji's goal. I didn't love that it took 2.5 minutes for somebody to get her a Zambian flag.
I know.
But I did think, and I almost never think this about goal scoring celebrations, but I was like, what would I be feeling if I was on the field right now, waiting for this superstar to get a flag to extend this very long celebration? Maybe just get the flag after we've finished this game and do a lap with it. And I understood it. I understood the symbolism. I fully support Rachel Kundananji. There's a political statement in there as well. I love that it did seem to have the effect of mentally switching. Everything about that moment is so big. The delay is not great. And you could really feel it. There was such euphoria.
Believe me, we felt it in the press box.
Yeah, exactly. So it's sort of like is outsized as a goal, even against late winners and even against late drawing goals. God, I don't want to side with him, but I don't think it's not a factor, is how I would describe it. And that's as much as you'll ever get me to say mentality mattered. But like, I don't think it was not a factor.
To refer back to the earlier clip from Montoya, if your objective is to entertain the fans, it's not a mentality issue or a mental lapse that causes space to open up and for you to get run over a little bit in the final half hour. That's you telling your players to stay high and to keep attacking and leaving space in behind. And that's on you and your tactical intentions, Albertin. So it's not solely a mentality problem, I think.
By the way, you know what fans hate? Conceding in the 100th minute to lose a game.
Well, credit to the fans. It did not seem to bother them too much, at least in the moment.
Totally. But what I mean, you keep doing that, you will have unhappy fans. You will have not entertained fans. We were talking about sort of the 3 game states of these 3 different games. This was chaos mode.
Yep.
This was total disorganization. I agree with you. Diana Ordonez's first goal is really the only positive action she had contributed to the game up until that moment. And it's a great finish. It's exactly what you want on a headed finish. Right back at the feet of the keeper, across the body, top-notch movement. If you get nothing from a striker in a game except that goal,
it's enough.
You kind of take it.
Yeah.
And then the composure she had after hitting a terrible penalty to come and scoop the rebound does deserve note. And Houston, from that penalty on, does play slightly more conservatively, does bunker a little bit more, does attempt to play to game state as much as I get the sense of Fran Alonso's side ever will. And the only reason Bay scores is that Rachel Kundananji is the, world record transfer breaker, real deal, elite super striker with foots given by a higher power. She scoops and again, Jane Campbell, no slouch. She just curls it around Jane Campbell in such a way that no 7-foot keeper's getting to that. It was just perfection. But it wasn't like Houston could have done much about that. That was just a moment of individual brilliance. But the game itself at that point was still pretty back and forth, not a lot of sustained possession, a lot of errant passes. Once we get back from the reset, Bay is just like riding pure adrenaline, and it cost them.
If your hope is to, quote, entertain the fans and keep pushing forward and keep looking for another goal and to play pretty exciting football, well, it would be nice if the nominal attacking quarterback of your squad was playing well. And if there is one thing that could bring this house of cards crashing down, besides injuries and the depth that Bay may have to think about, it's Dana Castellanos not playing well. And she has not been that good for these first 3 games.
I even think the shot she gets off in the 97th minute is deceptive in that. She was making a loud movement in that game. She scores a goal. It's a great finish. Unsavable. Step up and whack on a rebound. But kind of everything else about her game, I thought her passing was really loose again. Some of that's betting into this league, some of that's betting into a new side, but it's definitely one that we put a pin in last week and that we haven't removed yet. It's certainly something to watch for Bay as the season goes on. They concede, the 90 plus 10, they concede not a terrible shot, but one that isn't closed down.
And it's a savable one from Lizanne Pruill, who had a really bizarre game. She's becoming chaos neutral for me. She does a lot, and she does it in a big, loud way, and sometimes it comes off, and sometimes it really, really doesn't. And there were lots of moments like that throughout the game.
That's right. And certainly she could have done better on the winner. But the winner's also just a shot that sometimes goes in. It was just like a puncture in the balloon of what that could have been. And I get that it didn't feel that way. But I look at that and I say, in the larger scheme of things, to return to their XG goal differential, it's kind of fair comeuppance for the total of performances so far to not get a point from that game.
A lot can get turned around for them if Castellanos and the rest of the midfield and forwards can start getting on the same page. Then maybe they start connecting more and better passes in more dangerous areas. If the back line can start communicating and maybe get aware about when they can drop a little bit deeper and not leave so much space in behind them, that will be a big advantage. When Asisado Shwala and Rachel Kundananji start playing together is going to be a major, major shift. We can be fairly negative about the performances these first 3 games, but we still have not seen the best version of the team. That's through no bad decision-making by the coach, and it's not through any long-term injury danger, like Kundananji's back and Oshwala is still healthy. In 2 weeks, if Kundananji and Oshwala are starting together, we gotta maybe start from page 1 here on what this team is going to look like.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that the problems that we've said exist there, but the upside also exists. The mouth-watering possibilities of Kundananji and Oshwala.
But the NWSL does have to keep up its after-dark reputation, and therefore
it sure does.
We're sort of stuck with it. You know who doesn't have to keep up with their reputation? Expected own goals, because it's perfect already.
Oh, Jesus. Yeah, Jesus. Watch us get a negative review. Please don't take what Evan just said seriously.
Bring it on. Bring it on. Yeah. I drink your tears.
Oh, my God. Oh.
The haterade is so fresh. Please rate us, review us, follow us on whatever podcast platform you listen to. Tell all your friends about us. Rate us 5 stars if you are going to rate us at all. If you think that we have an own goal, please email us at expectedowngoals@gmail.com. That's the letter expectedowngoals@gmail.com. And please follow us on all social media channels at xowngoals. That's the letter xowngoals, including Blue Sky. We will not be back next Tuesday because it is an international break. So we will be talking to you most likely on Thursday to wrap up She Believes Cup, as well as the CAF Olympic qualifiers to determine the final 2 spots in the Olympics. The U.S. women's national team roster is out, and it is basically what I would have wanted, at least in terms of the attacking core, out of the World Cup roster, barring injury. To find Kat Macario, Mal Swanson, Jaden Shaw, Trinity Rodman, and Sophia Smith all playing together, and Alex Morgan, is where this program has been headed. And now we are going to see all of those players on the same lineup for the first time, which I think is pretty exciting.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to
One player I do wonder if we'll see very much of is Corbin Albert.
Oh, God.
Exactly. So we will talk to you on April 10th.
Bye.